If a little green is good, more is even better. Now, back to Green is Good with John Shigarian and Mike Brady.
Welcome back to Green is Good, and we're so excited today to have Temra Costa on with us. She's a nationally recognized sustainable food and farming advocate, and a little secret, her nickname is the Queen of Green because she has her own radio show, Green 960, up in the Bay Area. Welcome, Temra Costa. We're going to be talking about Farmer Jane today.
I'm so excited to be on the air with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, Temra, we're thrilled that you're here, and I have your book right underneath my hand, and I've thumbed through it. Haven't read it all, but I've been very motivated by it because you've done such a brilliant job compiling all these wonderful women who are pushing forward the sustainable food movement. But first, how did you even get inspired, or what was your epiphany moment to get involved with food and then sustainable food?
Yeah, well, I had been living in the Midwest. I grew up there and didn't move out to California until 2003. And it was when I walked into a natural food store in 1998 that really changed my world. My whole food world was turned upside down. And while I was studying agriculture at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I decided at that point on that my focus, my main passion would be food, that food impacts everybody's life, no matter who they are, where they're from, what language they speak. And I was very fortunate to get a job to move out to California to work on sustainable food issues back in 2003.
Gotcha.
And it was during this, evolution of working professionally on helping farmers connect with local markets that I noticed I was surrounded by women all the time. And that it was just really amazing that there were so many women that were doing a lot of the work, but also in the homes. They were responsible for shopping. They control upwards of 85% of household spending. And so it just really started to click for me that women are pushing a sustainable food agenda for the country.
Gotcha. So then you decided to do this book, and you have, about 30 women that you've profiled in your great book?
Yeah, there's 30 women total. I got some of them to write stories to include. So there's also other people that have submitted pieces that are printed in the book. So it does reach 30 different women.
And just for our listeners out there who are going to want more, are going to want to go on while they're listening to this show right now, Temra's great website is farmerjane.org. Farmerjane.org. So, Mike, you're on the site right now.
Yeah, right now, and I just kind of tabbed over, and it's very easy to navigate. So, congratulations on that, Temra. But I was just kind of looking and seeing your page about you. Also, you've got the review about the book. You've also got a featured Farmer Jane on there. You've got many Farmer Jane stories. And featured right now, we see Molly Rockeman from Earth Dance Farms and telling her story. This is just really a beautiful website. Congratulations.
Thanks so much. I mean, the web is such an important lever for change. People are going online to access information, and so this way I can keep the book fresh. I couldn't fit all the stories in the book that I wanted to. Right. I had over 100 nominations for women to be included that came in from all over the country, and so this is a way that I can continue telling the stories of Farmer Jane's throughout the U.S. and maybe even eventually beyond.
Well, Temra, when I go into a restaurant, I sit down, I'll say, what are the greatest hits here? Tell me, I'll ask the server, just tell me your 3 or 4 most popular items. What are your favorite stories? What are your 2 or 3 favorite stories? I know it's like a Sophie's Choice type question, but out of the 30, give us some of the greatest hits that really just turn your world around and the way you think of food.
Yeah, well, I have to say, Emily Oakley, she lives in Oaks, Oklahoma, and maybe it's the 3 Oaks altogether that I really love. But she's been able to start a food movement in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I love the stories from places that aren't super saturated by farmers markets or where people don't really have a lot of access to food.
Gotcha.
And Zoe Bradbury up in Oregon, the same thing. You could go to the big cities and you can sell the food to urban meccas, or you can go to places where people are really craving access to this type of food, where there's not a lot of access. So we're still seeing that big gap around the country of people wanting it, but they don't necessarily have access to it at this point in time.
Okay, and great point. So, in your book, I mean, there's so many great topics in your book. Networks for sustainable food, resources, which is great. Well, that's what people want when they come to a book. So your great book, Farmer Jane, has all these, great resources in it. But when you're talking about these ladies, are these ladies on both sides of the equation? Are they both in the production side and also in the selling side? Or where are they professionally in the food chain? Are some of these people restaurateurs with organic food restaurants? How does this work?
That's right. So, in looking at what creates a more sustainable food system, there's so many ways that people come into this. Sometimes it's sitting down and eating a meal, and that would be the restaurateur's perspective. Sometimes it would be watching a movie, and that's the media advocate perspective.
Gotcha.
Sometimes it's me and a next-generation farmer that's really inspiring, and so I included next-generation farmers. Then you have the urban component, so there's a lot of urban gardening and farming happening, so I had to include a chapter about that. And then, of course, the relationship builders from the farms. So the book includes a whole spectrum of women, farmers, chefs, educators, activists, that are all creating this movement, because it just doesn't come from one place. It has to come from all around us till it resonates with each person. And each person's going to be different in how they come into food as a way to create a more healthful environment, essentially.
And all these 30 stories are, like you just said, they're not just based on one part of the country. They're all from all different parts of the country.
That's right.
Any international stories here?
No, I stuck with the U.S. It was a big enough geographical place.
Okay.
It was challenging to really include stories from all over the U.S. because there's so many. So I had to pick and choose.
Gotcha.
Well, Temra, I'm on your site again and just navigating through it while we're conducting the show this morning. But to the point of, just spreading it around, you've got a tab that I just was fascinated, so I had to do a little deeper dive, Native Foods and Indigenous Knowledge. And it is really broken down regionally and nationally. And you've got some great links that are click-throughs to other sites, resources for indigenous cultures around the world, including listings of Native American food and recipes. I mean, this is really a treasure trove on your site, farmerjane.org.
Thanks. Yeah, all of those resources initially were going to be included in the book, but I talked to my publisher about it, and they said, well, websites are constantly coming in and out. Let's put it online so people can actually click through and lead people to the website through the book.
Got it.
And so that's what we decided to do, and I think that was a smart move, just because of how much information changes online, and also people want to click anyway. They don't necessarily want to type in an address.
Right on. So what Mike and I love is we love to give our listeners things that they can do to become part of the Green Revolution. But before we get to that, I just want to ask you a question. How long did it take you to compile this wonderful book and to create, and then to pare it down to what you've produced?
Well, I have to say it's the accumulation of 7 years of work. So I've been working in the field for 7 years, talking to people and, forming my own opinions about how the sustainable food system is set up. But the book itself was written in 1 year.
Wow.
The editing process was another year.
Right.
And here I am in the year of promotion. So I'm in year 3 right now.
Got it.
And it was just wonderful to work on. I was working with that nonprofit organization while writing the book, and it was just a really great tie-in to wrap up all that experience into one package.
Well, it's good for you. Now let's switch gears. How can our listeners who are listening, who are on your website, or are going to go to your website, or are going to buy your great book, Farmer Jane, how can they get more engaged to be more mindful of what they're eating and be more mindful of what's out there, and so they can know their choices better? How does this happen as a process?
Yeah, so everybody's a little different, but at the end of each chapter, I give people steps how they, as an eater, can engage in the subject matter of each chapter.
Right.
But just to give people some ideas of what I discuss is, if you're not eating seasonally, first of all, just visiting a farmer's market. You don't have to commit to shopping there every week, but starting to learn about seasonality is a really important first step. You have to learn about what's seasonal, what's regional for you, what you have access to that comes from local food producers. So taking that time to go down to the farmer's market instead of making a one-stop shop. It's a really important evolution of how you're going to eat more seasonally and locally.
Right.
And then, thinking about the organic, persuasion as well. When you're shopping in supermarkets, I feel like the organic industry is booming. It's growing still over 20% after a short downfall last year.
Sure.
But organic is still a big piece of the picture of how we need to divert the pesticides and fertilizers and everything away from our farms and out of our environment. So thinking about organic, can you maybe shift some of your resources towards food? And that is a shift to your future health. So this is the thing. Food has been taken out of our budgets. People, typically don't want to pay that much money for food just because it's been cheaply available to us for so long.
Right.
That we have to reincorporate not only the time in finding good food, which is that farmer's market trip or an extra trip to a U-Pick or a farm stand, but also just the foresight in thinking about it. It's not a quick meal that you can grab and go because we're starting to learn that processed foods are bad for our health.
Right. But how, as a country, can we shift to healthier foods? Like, are you excited about what you're seeing that's going on in Washington now with Michelle Obama and Bill Clinton and their health initiatives and cutting sugar out and the whole obesity issue? Are you, given that this is your business, what do you feel about what's going on in terms of real-time current events?
Yeah, I see a lot of great progression. The Let's Move campaign is definitely one of them. Kathleen Merrigan, who was appointed to the USDA as the Deputy Secretary of Agriculture, she's definitely an advocate for the type of food and farming that myself and a lot of people really care about and want access to. Unfortunately, we're still seeing a lot of spending going into biotechnology.
Right.
We're still seeing a lot of the other appointees are not pro-sustainable foods. So, we've been given a couple of cookies.
Right.
But not necessarily that glass of milk to go along with it. So we're seeing some changes, but what's going to be really interesting is the Farm Bill of 2012, because that's where our tax dollars get appropriated to either monoculture corn, soy, and wheat, or diversified fresh fruits and vegetables that are better for our health. So that's where the rubber meets the road. And there's also a policy measure coming up this fall, the Child Nutrition Reauthorization Act, which is something that nobody would want to touch with a stick because of its name. But people should care about it because that determines the amount that school districts get for each meal, refunded by the federal government. So this is where the farm to school and getting kids to eat more healthful fruits and vegetables and our future generations to get turned on to those fresh flavors again really happens.
Well, it sounds, Temra, like if anybody enjoyed the recent TV show that featured Jamie Oliver coming to West Virginia, if you liked that show and that spoke to you, then you really need to check out. Give us the name of the act again, the title, so we can Google it and look up and see what's going on in this bill.
Yeah, you can go to nationalfarmtoschool.org, and on the farmerjane.org website, there's a whole farm-to-school section that you can totally tap into that Child Nutrition Reauthorization Act.
Wow.
We know when kids eat better and they eat more healthfully at school, they do better in school.
Right.
And they're more able, they're less agitated, less ADD, less all of these issues that we're seeing with our kids today.
Gotcha. Hey, what state is leading the way? Like, is California leading the way with the sustainable food movement, or is it Oregon, or is it some other state that what amazed you in the process? What weren't you expecting during this whole process and writing this wonderful book? What were you totally shocked and amazed by?
Well, I was totally shocked and amazed that we're still using immigrant labor to produce our food, even in a democratic country like the U.S. I was really amazed that workers still bring their kids to the fields to work, illegally before and after school, and that was one of the stories I told in the book. I was also amazed to, learn about how variances between city governments and, places like New York City are doing some really progressive things with fresh fruits and vegetables, to even the urban environments like Detroit, Cleveland, St. Louis are starting to see a revival of food production in the urban core. So it's pretty exciting We have some challenges to overcome with, soil and water resources, but I feel like people are really getting into this now, which is super exciting.
So you're feeling optimistic of where we're heading?
Absolutely.
And urban farming is a trend that's here to stay and going to be with us for part. Is going to become part of our DNA and part of our culture here in the United States.
Yeah, it's nothing new. I feel like it's being reintroduced to us, and people are really resonating with the fact that they want to know where their food's coming from and that they, too, can produce some food at home.
What's your favorite, if you have a favorite, and I don't want you to get you in trouble with this kind of question, but what is your favorite natural food or organic food restaurant that you've run across in all your travels in America, or what are your few favorites?
Oh, wow. Well, I definitely love Le Trois, which is in Madison, Wisconsin. That's where I'm from. And
right.
That restaurant manages to serve 85% locally grown goods year-round, which is amazing.
Right.
I mean, there's so many great restaurants.
Right.
And, oh, gosh, here in the Bay Area alone, I mean, my list could run on and on and on. And even on the East Coast, there's so many great restaurants.
But aren't the great chefs, the Wolfgang Pucks, the Mario Battellis, even though they have these wonderful mainstream brands that they've created, but aren't they all now growing their own fruits and produce for their own restaurants?
A lot of restaurants are doing that.
Yeah.
They are either buying farms or they have a restaurant-affiliated garden that they're growing some of their stuff in. And that's a transition, too. I think that came out of, there's the upstate New York kind of Red Hill Barn project that's a restaurant and farm that's right up there. So I think that is a new emerging trend for sure.
How about you personally? Do you eat? Your cereal in the morning with soy milk, or how is your own eating habits with regards to sustainable food and organic food and things of that such?
Yeah, well, lately I've been trying to reduce the amount of food packaging that I'm using. So I'm making a lot of stuff from scratch, which takes more time.
Right.
So when I talk about eating locally, you can either save time or money, but you really can't do both.
Right.
Because you're either going to have to spend more time processing food, freezing food, canning food. Buying it at the peak of the season, that's when it's the cheapest and it tastes the best.
Right.
Or, you're going to have to buy it in a supermarket environment where it's usually not as price competitive with the farmers markets or the wholesaler docks that are oftentimes selling to the public now, which is pretty amazing. So my diet is pretty much whole foods. I eat, unpasteurized stuff as much as I can, whole milk, whole grains, just organic.
Everything.
And, I'm pretty much blessed to live here in the Bay Area. When I go home to visit my family in Wisconsin, I see the reality of the lack of access of good food in a lot of places, especially during winter. So, I just feel lucky to be able to eat here seasonally year-round and have access to everything except for, like me, we don't grow hops for beer, but we have everything else practically.
For our listeners out there, in terms of greatest hits and resources for them to engage or to start putting a toe in the water towards eating organically, do you have a few favorite food store chains that sell or at least show have enough of a selection of organic foods that our listeners can engage in? Is there a favorite couple of chains out there that you'd want to recommend that they go in and start poking around in?
Well, there's, I think, supporting organic and local food at wherever you're eating or shopping. If you're not seeing it, asking for it.
Right.
That's step one. If you don't see it, ask for it because they will buy it. And then step two, check out a farmer's market.
Right.
Right, and learn the seasonality of your place because that's how you're really going to, get alive with the seasons. As far as the chains go, the Trader Joe's and the Whole Foods, I'm really adverse to the fact that they have their own store brands.
Oh, okay.
I just don't know how I feel about that because, Trader Joe's organic yogurt is Strauss Family Creamery yogurt, and that's a local product, and the creamery loves that market for their yogurt. But unfortunately, I wouldn't know otherwise that it's coming from a local farm.
Right.
So I really want the most transparency as possible in my food.
Gotcha.
And I want to know where it's from, which county at the very least, if not the origin.
Right.
So, I think those, but if we continue asking for local, seasonal, sustainable food wherever we eat and shop, I found that they're starting to, the businesses are starting to get pretty good with their spiel and response.
Right.
So now we have to start pushing a little bit deeper, folks. We need to say, well, what farm exactly are you talking about?
Right.
Because I know that when I go out to eat now, it's almost like a recording machine. All of our ingredients are sustainable and seasonal whenever possible. And that whenever possible is whenever it's convenient for the restaurateur, for example, or the wholesaler or the grocer, for that matter.
Do you applaud like a Safeway brand that brings out like that, the O brand organics? Is that something that you're encouraging and encouraged by?
Well, I used to shop in conventional stores, and I would buy the organic products in those stores. I feel like that helps grow the organic industry for sure. So if that's what you have available to you, shop the organic section. Absolutely.
Gotcha. Now, if you weren't writing and doing your radio show and stuff, after meeting all these wonderful, inspirational women across the country, who would you be? Who would you want to be in the food chain process? What would you, when you put on I'd rather be doing that hat in terms of this movement, what would you rather be doing besides writing about it in the food chain? What would you rather be doing?
Yeah, well, I think that's where I'm going next, is really rolling up my sleeves and getting involved, either in a community kitchen project where you can do some larger scale processing for people, just because everybody doing it in their own kitchen isn't really that energy efficient per se.
Right.
So, looking at the community kitchen concept and even the old Grange system, which stretches across the entire United States, which is largely underutilized, or this is like my kitchen project, or I would love to take a product from the farm to the market. So following that trail of production to, how do you get it to people? And I'm thinking cheese is probably my area of interest.
Well, being that you're from Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. And my great-grandparents had a dairy. It makes sense.
There you go. That's interesting. So in terms of people that don't have, we're down to the last 2 minutes, and what are some pearls of wisdom that, besides all the great information you just shared, what can we do with our listeners? What can our listeners do to get more engaged? Besides going to your great website, farmerjane.org, what are the few of your Temra Costa's pearls of wisdoms for our listeners as we sign off here?
Right. Well, educate yourself about where your food's really coming from. There's resources on sustainable meat, sustainable fruits and vegetables, and sustainable fish. I think we need to look at all of those different, components of our food. So educate yourself, which it takes a little bit of extra time, but you could start with watching Food Inc. I think it's a great introductory movie into the food system.
Okay.
Or you can watch The Matrix online, Meatrix. That's a little spoof off of The Matrix. But educate yourself, get involved, and definitely try to go to one farmer's market and just see how it feels.
Gotcha.
To be in an environment where people are interacting more and where you can hunt and forage for your food in more of a way that supports our local economies.
Well, Temra Costa, it was a total honor for Mike and I to have you today on Green is Good. What you're doing is amazing. By you highlighting these 30 wonderful women will help put the movement forward. It will sustain the movement, but also give it some velocity. We ask our listeners to go to your great website, farmerjane.org, to support the movement by buying your great book, Farmer Jane. Temra Costa, you are living proof that green is good.
Thanks for having me here today.